Hey guys, Marcello again here from the beautiful city of Medellin, Colombia. Check out that view. I'll give you guys a little bit more of the view of the sunsets and everything here in a second. Today we're going to be talking about things to know before traveling, now that we're in the middle of the pandemic. So travel is officially back. New studio, new recordings. I plan on doing a lot more videos now. And yeah, so now people are getting vaccinated. Countries are opening. You get to enjoy life a little bit after the pandemic. I don't think things are going to go back to normal per se, but normal enough that you can travel. First thing, let me show you here in Medellin, Colombia, amazing view. I'll show you there some of the pictures of the sunsets. Amazing. Medellin has always been, I guess I can call it my home, right? Not necessarily my second home, but got back here, moved, did some other things as well. And so now that everything is opening up and I've traveled a little bit, because as you guys know, we teach people how to day trade at Day Trading Academy. So we travel all over to be able to do the trainings and things like that. We've done in-person events. I wanted to share with you a little bit about if you're going to travel, what you should keep in mind, you know, what you're going to have to do, because obviously you can't just hop on a plane and go somewhere anymore, right? And maybe some recommendations in terms of where you should go or what you should do and things like that. Now, the first thing you should know, and the most important thing, is that it's going to depend what country you want to go to based on the restrictions that they have. Very similar to the United States, for example, we have a situation where there's places that, you know, New York and California, for example, are asking for vaccine certificates to be able to go ahead and eat in restaurants. Whereas if you go to a place like Florida or Texas, everything's open, stadiums, concerts, you know, no requirements, no masks. So this is kind of the dynamic that you're going to have to navigate, let's say, if you're going to go ahead and travel, right? Now, I don't want to get too political because it kind of seems like in the US, this is just the main thing where you're kind of on one of the extremes, you know, where yeah, you should or no, you shouldn't. So I don't want to get into the politics of it. I'm just going to let you know, kind of do my best to navigate kind of those two extremes, whether you're really serious about COVID and you have your vaccine and all that, or if you want to avoid those things or you haven't got your vaccine, or et cetera, okay? So the first thing is going to be the restrictions by country. So the majority of countries now are moving in a direction where they're requiring the vaccine. And then in addition to that, now they're requiring the vaccine and a negative test. I'm recording this now in October 2021. And before, when the vaccines were proliferating everywhere, there was a situation where you just needed to have the negative test, right? But now it's, depending on what country you're going to go to, you know, you just look on Google, can Americans travel to Spain, or can Americans travel to Colombia, or restrictions in certain country, because it's one of the biggest things that you're going to have to know now is the fact that it literally changes by the day. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, in the majority of cases, outside of a select few countries, one of them being Colombia, you're going to need a negative PCR test, a negative COVID test to be able to travel there. So that's the thing that you're going to have to know. The overwhelming majority of countries now are asking that negative COVID test outside of, you know, for example, Mexico and Colombia are the two countries. Brazil is asking for a negative COVID test, but Mexico and Colombia, you can go without anything. No vaccine, no COVID test, nothing. And then after that, as I mentioned to you guys, how it changes per day, there's a situation where a country might restrict another country because of a breakout in COVID, for example. So Spain recently, for example, had restrictions for Colombians because of the breakouts that they had here, and they wouldn't allow Colombians to enter into the country. There's going to be a new law that's going on in the United States as well, where they're opening to foreign visitors, for those of you guys that want to come to the United States, that were restricted from coming before. So the US, for example, restricted Europeans from coming to the US, right? But now they're going to relieve all of those restrictions as long as you're vaccinated. And obviously, if they're going to require a COVID test and things like that, just Google that, because it literally changes by the day. So that's the first thing. So most of you probably want to go to Europe, right? Europe is going to depend by country. Spain, if you're vaccinated, no problem. You go get vaccinated and you get a negative test. But if you go to a country, for example, like Italy is a little bit more strict in terms of going and who can and who can't and things like that. So a lot of the countries, as long as you have a negative test or if you have a vaccine, then you're not going to be required to be able to quarantine. But again, it depends by country. Now, I'll give you an example. Being here in Latin America, Colombia and a country like Mexico are completely open. As I mentioned, they don't even require a negative test to be able to visit. No vaccine, no negative PCR test. But a country like Argentina or Chile, for example, they haven't even opened yet, right? They're still closed to tourism, even though that's kind of changing now. That's going to be one of the things to keep in mind. Now, when you are going to travel, the airports, for the most part, there's going to be a few changes. It does seem like they are busier now, and it's not due to the fact that more people are traveling. It seems like there's less people working at the airports. In the United States, keep in mind that we're probably going to have more, let's call them rolling outages or rolling cancellations or situations with the flights. I don't know if you guys saw the news, but Southwest, for example, recently canceled 2,000 flights, American Airlines as well. So they're on top of the situation with the COVID restrictions. Just keep in mind that you might run into a little bit of trouble when it comes to your flight because of, it seems like everything, there's shortages and problems and things like that. So that's the one thing. And most times when you're going to go into an airport or a plane, they're going to require you to wear a mask. And then also you might want to be a little prepared for the fact that in the airports is a situation where, since things aren't necessarily back to normal completely yet, there's a situation where a lot of stores might be closed. But you are going to need to wear a mask, even in places like Florida, where they don't require masks to do anything. When you go to the airport in places in Florida, you're going to be required to wear a mask because it's a federal law, and the airports are considered federal. I don't know if it's federal property, but you know, the air aviation essentially goes by the federal law. So other than that, it's just a matter of knowing what countries you kind of want to go to. And obviously, if you're vaccinated or not, as I mentioned, places like Colombia and Mexico are completely open. There's no restrictions at all. Brazil, for the most part, you can go to with a negative PCR test. Peru as well, if you ever want to go to Machu Picchu without a million people. But and then you have other places, for example, like Argentina and Chile, that are just now starting to open. And they require the vaccine and a quarantine and a negative PCR test and another test when you arrive. So it's just going to kind of depend on what extreme these countries are in. For the most part in Europe, I think if you have the vaccine and you have a negative PR test, you can actually travel to those locations without a problem. For those of you guys now that are going to come to the United States on November 8th, just keep in mind, if you go to a place like New York City, they're starting to require the vaccine cards to be able to even go into a restaurant and eat. Whereas if you go to a place like Miami or Tampa or Texas, for example, there's zero restrictions, no masks, no cards to eat, none of that stuff as well. So that, for the most part, is kind of the overall idea of what you're going to run into when it comes to traveling now. The only other thing would be on the planes. If you guys are more on the cautious side in regards to the pandemic and COVID, just keep in mind that some of the airplanes are not restricting the middle seat. So, you know, if you're afraid or if you have the funds, buy what I always do now, for example, is I buy a business class flight, and then what you can do is you can sit and you can have the air kind of sitting on top of you, so the air kind of flows the circulations on the mask. Whereas if you're in the economy seat or, you know, in the back of the plane, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because obviously you don't have the AC in exactly the right place and things like that. So just keep that in mind. And then other than that, the lounges, I've noticed as well. I generally, when I always flew out of Colombia, since you guys know I'm based here, I always flew with Avianca, which is the Star Alliance. So United, Copa Airlines, also Avianca. And Avianca, I wouldn't recommend flying with because they have a lot more restrictions even when you board and deplane. And so they require you to, and not that it's a good thing or bad thing, right? Again, I don't want to get political, but I'm just letting you know, where they require everybody to be seated, and then they take everybody out of one row, not horizontal row, but actual vertical row, and then they get on the other side. So even if you bought, for example, business class, you might be one of the last people to deplane. Whereas if you fly with somebody like American or a US airline, they're going to be more, let's say, less restrictive. You know, if you buy a first class flight, you board first, you get off first. It's like before. But the lounges have changed. And so it seems like what's happening, that a lot of the airlines are trying to save a little bit of money now due to the fact that they're not making as much money as before. it kind of seems like we were moving in this direction anyway, right? And so it's a situation where the lounges may not permit you to come in depending on what kind of flight you have. And I'll just tell you guys a quick story. I was flying business from Colombia, Miami to Tampa. And from Miami to Tampa, the American Airlines lounge in Miami, they wouldn't allow me to enter the lounge because it was a first-class domestic flight. So there's going to be a lot of changes, and I'm sure that there's going to continue these changes due to the fact that the airlines aren't necessarily making as much money as before. And obviously, if we have another shutdown or another breakout worldwide and everything shuts down again, then that may be another situation again. So just, step one, just look online, hop on Google or DuckDuckGo if you don't want to be censored, to look at what the restrictions are to enter the country. The most likely scenario, if it's more restrictive, you're going to need a vaccine or a negative PCR test and or quarantine. That's kind of the one extreme. And then obviously on the other extreme, you have a situation, countries like Colombia and Mexico, as I mentioned, that don't have any restrictions at all, even no PCR test, nothing to enter. And then you have other countries, maybe like Brazil or Peru, where you take a negative test, you arrive, it's fine, but no quarantine. So that's kind of the overall spectrum. So get out there and travel. Colombia, I'm going to recommend you guys come here. It's amazing. Even if you go to Europe right now, there's not a lot of people traveling that much anymore, so you can actually enjoy a lot of these amazing sites. I don't know if you guys have seen on Instagram those pictures where it's like in Instagram in reality with all the people everywhere. So now's a great time to travel if you want to deal. It's obviously a little bit more complicated than it was before, but you can enjoy it a little bit more too, because obviously you have a situation where there's a lot less people traveling now. So those are the things that you have to keep in mind when traveling. Let me know in the comments if you guys have traveled. Let me know if you guys run into different things. Let me know if I maybe missed something, right? I've been to quite a few countries already, especially with the business doing events and things. And so I kind of know a little bit of the lay of the land. But if I missed something, let me know in the comments. If you guys have anything to add as well, don't forget to subscribe. Smash the like button because it helps a lot with the YouTube algorithm. And also don't forget to if you have any questions, just leave them in the comments. We'll see you next time. Bye.